I just had to call Children's Services Bureau on my sister. Have you had to do something crappy for a family member that needed to be done? My mum is an alcoholic and I've had to put up with so much crap from her. Usually the worst I had to do was make sure she didn't burn the house down after drunkenly making food, put her to bed with a glass of water and make sure she didn't throw up in her sleep. Several times I've had to call the police when she got violent and twice she's been committed under the Mental Health Act after taking overdoses. At the time I felt like the shittiest daughter ever, and the rest of my family was split in half about it. Half of them blamed me for my mum's problems. She's had a problem with drink since before I was born. And the other half were sympathetic and tried to reassure me that I did the right thing. This all happened to me between the ages of 13 and 19. I'm 24 now. Last year my mum went into recovery, and while she's had a few lapses, she's coping well. Our relationship is also a lot better than it used to be. Don't worry, OP. You did the right thing. The kids' safety was the most important thing here. Can you keep us updated on what happens to the kids? My one cousin was in the hospital and in very bad shape. His mother was on the phone with me asking a bunch of questions and having me research via Google since the doctors were being quiet and didn't seem at all helpful. I spent most of the night looking at medical journals and came to the conclusion that he was dying and there was nothing left that could have been done. Now, my cousin loved his mother very much and wouldn't want her to worry in his final moments, so I just said there wasn't anything I could do. Didn't mention what I found out and told her to spend the night with him and make him comfortable as possible since he seemed to be in pain. She agreed that it was the best option and I hung up the phone, cried, and drank half a bottle of NyQuil in order to get myself to sleep. Knowing he wouldn't wake up the next morning, I was raised with him and it hit me hard. He died 4 hours later in his sleep after spending his final hours with his mother. They ate dinner and watched their favorite shows together. Then she put him to bed. He died in his sleep while she was watching over him. I still feel guilty as all heck. TLDR. I didn't tell my aunt her son was dying. She was incredibly stressed and had a feeling that it was the case but wasn't 100% sure, so that his final moments would be peaceful ones with his mother instead of her screaming and crying. I think your cousin and aunt both appreciate it. No one wants to lose their child, but a peaceful way out is better than other alternatives. My sister. She's a bright girl. She really is, but she fell in love with an butthole. He's a H addict, pill addict, started smoking bath salts, all that stupidity, before it got really bad. This is before, when she broke up with him. He threw a fit, went and doped up, locked himself in his room with a shotgun and told his roommates he was going to kill himself and he would shoot anyone who tried to stop him. He actually loosed a single shot at someone for knocking on the door. The warden kept the shot intact and blew a good size hole in the door, missing this kid's head by inches. He OD'd but didn't die. She tries to break up with him again because he came crawling back saying he was done with drugs and needed her in his life, etc. And he drives to her friend's party, where she is talking to an old friend of hers, a male, and this dude, let's call him Andrew, freaks the frick out. He drags her out of the house by her hair, throws her on the ground, and pulls a gun on her. He threatens all the party goers, who immediately call the cops. He fires a few shots into the air, and he bolts. My sister goes home, but he beat her there. He kicked in her door and was waiting for her, punched her, kicked her, finally curled up in a ball because he was coming down. But she wouldn't call the cops. My dad and I had to. The problem is that she wouldn't press charges. I wish I could say that we handled it well and professionally, but when she was telling us all these things, we couldn't really process things like normal, sensible adults. So we got my dad's pickup, loaded the gun rack with the biggest, scariest weapons we could, and just went and sat outside his house. We sat there all day. We would leave to get food and come back and sit. We did this for days. We did it for a whole week. The entire time his roommates are nervously checking their windows, but we never once saw that cowardly frick's face. Finally my sister finds out what we're doing and asks us to stop, so we do, on the condition that she get a restraining order, which she did. However, she invites him over to talk and they end up back together. We don't really know what else to do. I have family in the military and we've contemplated just kinda quietly shipping him off to boot camp, but they've also advised against that. Mate, you need a longer term solution or he is going to kill your sister one day. When I was 17, when my grandmother was sliding into the dementia, or whatever it was, that eventually shut her body down function by function and caused her to die, I called 911 and stood in front of her car so she wouldn't drive. She'd gotten very lost a little before that and she'd lost the ability to speak, in addition to losing weight and generally having her body start to quit on her. A police officer came and suspended her license until she retook and passed her driving test, which she never bothered to retake. I just wasn't sure that it would be safe for anyone for her to be on the road. I felt like crap, but I was pretty sure it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. My so's grandparents should have had someone do this for them. Otherwise grandma wouldn't have decided to take a shortcut through 4 people's backyards, fences included. I was in community college and living with my parents. My younger brother was home on break from university. He went out drinking with some friends one Friday night. I was in my room talking to my at the time girlfriend over AIM when I got a phone call from my brother saying he got into a wreck. I quickly rushed downstairs and woke up my mom and we both rushed to where he was. 5 minutes away, we reached the accident site and my brother is sitting on the curb without a scratch on him. His Jeep ran headfirst into a tree, caving in the front half 2.5 feet from where the bumper typically is. My brother is also stumbling drunk. My mom is freaking out while I'm trying to get my brother to calm down. I get ready to call 911 when I realize I'm about to report my brother for DUI. I was mostly concerned about him being injured and not realizing it, but I knew the police would show up as well as EMS. I tell my brother this, and all he does is nod. I call 911 and report what happened. As we're waiting for EMS, my brother pleads for us to leave. He never admitted it, but I know he was ashamed of himself. I told him to just sit down. We stayed there until EMS and the police got there. He was fine, but I remember tearing up watching the officer arrest him. We picked him up from the police station an hour later. That was 6 years ago and I still look back on that as one of the toughest things I ever had to do. I'm closer to my brother than any other member of my family. A year after it happened, I asked him if he was ever angry at me for calling 911 that night. He looked at me and said, "I'm angry at myself that you had to call 911. For your information, he hasn't been drunk since that night." I called the cops on my dad when I was about 6 or 7. He was beating on my mom. She didn't want me to, but I didn't care. The lesson to be learned is this: if your partner treats you like crap, don't stay with him or her for the children. The children would rather be happy without a dad or mom than fuba when they are grown. That's why my mom left my father when she was pregnant with me. Unfortunately, she remarried and my stepdad abused me physically and mentally. Instead, I once asked my mom why she stayed with him and she said that someday I would grow up and move away and she didn't want to be alone. Not sure if I'm completely fuba, but definitely pretty FU. So, I have this third cousin who would easily qualify to represent Canada in the London 2012 douchebag Olympics and probably get at least bronze. Silver for sure if they didn't let sex offenders enter. He outdouches his siblings, which is an insane feat, although his niece is already winning the second generation junior Commonwealth douchebag games. He looks down his freaking nose at everyone, considering them less intelligent because he went to a prestigious college. It's good, but it's by no means Yale or even York, and he went there for 2 months before not even managing to be a Christmas graduate. Despite this, he claims he got a degree in history which his parents back up. We don't challenge him because it's easier just to ignore him. One summer night after my high school graduation, the family is having a little bonfire. He comes up to me, obviously drunk despite the fact that he's supposed to be watching his kids. He asks if I'm going to community college or what. I'm actually wearing the sweatshirt of the very good university I got into and tell him it. He goes on about how he can't believe the kid of someone as retarded as my dad is actually going to a real university. I say, hey, man, back off my dad. He did really well for himself. My dad has ADHD and several learning disabilities and never finished high school, but he did go to trade school, made a lot of money working, and then started his own successful business. My cousin keeps going on about how he expects his kids to go to Harvard because if my dad's kid can just get into a university, his will be geniuses. I finally snap and say my dad has his heavy mechanics degree, which is one more degree than he has. He actually swung a punch at me and connected, though pretty weakly because he's skinny fat. At this time it seems relevant to mention I was a barely 18-year-old girl. I had been drinking a little and just reacted, socking him straight up the jaw because I can't aim anything and knocking him off the deck. He and his parents still won't speak to me, which is a pleasant improvement. I have never had to buy my own alcohol at family gatherings. Nobody insults the father of Tits Hemingway and gets away with it. Oh, and he totally deserved that. You should not feel guilty in the slightest. You did the right thing, for sure. If you, or anyone in your family can gain custody and provide the love these children deserve, you're a legitimate hero. My sister is a train wreck and always has been drugs, drinking, a host of psychological issues. She gave birth to my niece in 2004, living with her junkie boyfriend. One night, my niece being 10 months old at the time, the parents decide to go to some party get the guy's next fix. So, my mom stops by their house around 9 that night to check in. Things had gotten better, but we'd always had our doubts. She found my niece crying and alone. No car in the driveway. My mother immediately files for custody and it's granted. 8 years later, my niece is one of the brightest kids in her 2nd grade class, loves to learn, has a very mature perspective on life, and is in general the most awesome person in my life. And I have taught her the finer parts of childhood, reading, Legos and Jurassic Park. So this is my offering of encouragement. Be the best dang guardian you can be. If you gain custody, and you will, treat the child like gold and give him a kick-butt upbringing. Good on you, Murdockit. You did the right thing. Reading, Legos and Jurassic Park. You taught her the finer parts of life itself. No easy shots, modern day Buddha. You did the right thing. The kids are all that matters and hopefully they will end up better in the end. I worked with a woman that became a C addict. She had 2 children, a girl in early high school and a boy in middle school. The mother would leave them for weeks at a time while she hung out with her new boyfriend in a town about an hour away. Her daughter would call our workplace and ask if the boss or I could bring them lunch money to school so they could eat. Then the daughter started coming into our workplace asking for money so she could go to the store and buy food. A co-worker took them to the store and bought them food, then went to the house to see what it was like. The only food they had in the house was some cookies. This young girl had been doing her best trying to keep crap together. She kept her little brother fed and made sure they both got to school. Everything looked fine from the outside. The girl was afraid of losing her brother. I called CPS and reported the mother. A few days later the children were removed and placed in custody of their father, who had no idea what was going on. He lived far away and had been told everything was fine. I don't regret turning that worthless mother into CPS. The kids were better off without her and they turned into great adults. I just got back into the country and I'm staying with my grandparents for a few weeks while I look for a new place. I have a cousin who's been living here for the past few years. He's 30, an alcoholic, and a drug addict. He's never held a job for more than a couple months, and he's had so many DUIs and parole violations he'll never get his license back. A few months back he got wasted and made a huge scene, after which my grandparents had finally had enough of him and told him to get out. He managed to weasel his way back onto the property, but he was told if he ever drinks again on the property, they'll kick him out again. Since I've been here, I've been downright charitable to him. I've shared my food, I've given him rides to places, I've done all sorts of nice crap for him. Fast forward to last week, my grandparents go out of town for the weekend. From the minute they left, he was on a mission to get wasted. He broke into the house, drank more liquor than I've ever seen a human being consume in my life. He starts getting violent, so I kick him out of the house. Then he starts torturing the dogs, and I freaking lose it. I go outside and I tell him to calm the frick down and leave the dogs alone. He doesn't like that. We get into a fist fight. He starts breaking crap. In one day he managed to do over $1,000 in property damage. Finally, I've had enough. I call my grandparents and tell them what's happening, and then I call the cops. Cops come and take him away. Grandparents get back and pack all his crap into his trailer and tow him off the property, several miles away. Now I'm dealing with him showing up every few days when no one's around, breaking in and stealing crap. Not much we can do at the moment because the cops don't care. The jails here are full, so anytime we call them it's just a catch and release program. They come get him, take him for about 8 hours and then drop him off at a friend's house and it all starts over. I don't have a story, but I feel it doesn't hurt having someone say this in your current situation. I find what you did very brave and wish you and your family the best. Our circler jerk and our bravera jerk have ruined me. I can't look at the word brave without thinking of so brave. I'm going through an identical situation. My sister smokes weed, pops pills, and her house is filthy. I called CPS on her because my nieces are always sick and they look and smell like street children. I felt terrible about it at first, but now her kids are in a shared custody situation between my mom and their paternal grandmother. You are very brave for doing the right thing. I hope you feel better about it, and I hope the rest of your family sees that you are doing what is best for the kids. I had to do the exact same thing as OP, my useless stepsister who is back in rehab. Complete T. She's 22, smokes weed, drinks excessively, didn't finish school, no job, and her boyfriend has no job either. She had a 2-year-old son who was constantly getting sick and making my stepdad worried, which made him shell out money for medicine for the child. A year back was when this all happened. Sometimes January. I had heard she had gotten hold of some C and she was going to go party that night and get all fricked up. Then and there I called child services when I heard what she was going to do around that child. They came to the house and saw that she had been cutting lines of coke on the kitchen table when they peered through the window. Immediately after seeing this, they called the cops. They arrived, arrested her and the boyfriend and took the child into child services. She was charged with child endangerment and the like. The child is doing well now in care of the other sister, who is much more responsible. There was a few notes about what was inside the house that could have endangered the child's safety. Broken glass, mold, disgustingly dirty areas, broken used syringes, weed scattered on the floor, a real crack den. Is IT really a crack den if IT had not crack? OP, I applaud you for the courage to do what I wished a lot of family members would have done for us. My dad is a hardcore drug addict. My mom is an alcoholic and a drug addict. There were so many times that we didn't have food, even basics to make something like toast or eggs or anything, that I would go over to friends' houses to eat. I was beaten so severely by both my parents. My mom slammed my head into a window. My dad kicked me with steel-toed boots and cracked a rib. At 9 years old, it got to the point that I had attempted suicide 3 times by the time I was 14. My sister succeeded, killing herself at the age of 18. I lost my only real link to the family that day. My parents split up. My dad took my brother and my other older sister to Colorado. We lived in Indiana at the time, and I stayed with my mom to continue school. She then got into a relationship with a con man. So in the break between my sophomore and junior year, she moved us to Kentucky. I went back to Indiana for a weekend to see my boyfriend and earn some money babysitting, and when I came back, she was gone. No phone call, no anything. I started staying where I could, ended up at my boyfriend's house, who then started to beat me as well. I couldn't get a hold of my mom. My dad was currently doing crack in CO, was so unfit that my little brother ended up in foster care, so I had no support whatsoever. Happy ending though. I graduated high school, only member of my family to do so, left my deadbeat boyfriend, ended up in Colorado with my sister, went to college, almost got a degree for veterinary technology, just couldn't finish because I got married to the love of my life and I got pregnant. After I have the baby, he's going to probably be deployed, Air Force, and I'm gonna go back to finish my school. So thank you OP, you gave me hope and humanity again, that you stood up for the people who have no voices. I wish you all the luck with your career in veterinary technology. I'm so glad to hear a good ending for someone. I did the same thing a year ago. My little sister has a 8-year-old and hasn't had a job in 3 years. She smokes M and my niece is way underdeveloped. She hasn't been to a full year of school until this past year. I called CPS and they removed her from the home and is staying with her grandma, while my sister doesn't talk to me anymore. I know I did the best thing for my niece. The sad part is, my little sister has not learned anything from this. About 6 months ago she was arrested for felony breaking and entering, copped a plea bargain and is free with no charges. She has a court hearing this month and could get her child back on a technicality. The grandma hasn't been bringing my niece up to see my sister for visitations. As a caring uncle, I'm driving 600 miles for the court day just to make sure my sister doesn't get her kid back. It just sickens me to see this happen. For our friends outside the USA, 600 miles, 965.6 km. Yeehaw. My brother escaped from a minimal security jail in Alabama and went to California to live with my mom, who gave us up to live with our grandparents when he was 15, and my sister and I were 5. Well, he was guilting her for leaving us and was constantly beating her up, and she never did anything about it. I made an anonymous tip to the Alabama police on where his location was, and he was caught, returned to jail, and finished out his time. That was about 5 years ago. To this day he, not my mother, does not know it was me who turned him in. I think you accidentally a grammar on that last part there. Tell your entire family to shove it. You are the only one who actually cares. I know people who grew up in these situations, and when they start to get older they will realize how little anyone who was supposed to love them, parents, extended family, just pretended like nothing was wrong. You will be a hero to that little kid when he grows up. Yes, I love that last line. You are doing it for them, not against her. You are a good person. People are just stupid sometimes. Told my guidance counselor about my abusive family at 15. I cried every night that first summer in foster care. Even though I have a good foster family, my nightmares would just be about living with them. My foster mom wouldn't understand when she asked what I had a nightmare about, and I would sheepishly explain something like dreaming I had to stay the night at my ex-family's house, etc. It was worth it. To anyone in an abusive home, yes, it is abuse. Please get out of it. If you don't feel like anyone cares, I care. I don't know you, but I know your situation. It all turned out for the best, though. I've been with my foster family a year now, and I actually feel not terrible. After my mom overdosed on pain meds for the 5th time, me and my dad moved while she was in the hospital and completely cut off all communication with her and the hospital. It sounds really crappy, but the social worker from a previous hospital stay had said that they couldn't put her in a public nursing home if she had relatives who were able to care for her, even if we didn't want to. Not my story. It's about a kid. We'll call him Scott. Scott's parents abused alcohol. His dad became very violent when drinking, and usually took it out on the 2 sons. Other times, it would be the mom. It was one of those situations where the boys took the beatings to save their mom. One night, Scott heard his dad hitting his mom. Scott took a baseball bat to his father. The guy lived. I don't know the rest of the story, but I respect the heck out of Scott. Bad situation to be in, but I like the cut of this Scott fellow's jib. To me, but my brother got roped in a check scam with some of his co-workers. They were using him as the fall guy. The stolen traveler's checks would be deposited in his bank account, so he would be the one with the trail. My mom overheard him talking on the phone. She told my dad. They spoke with my brother and took him down to the police station to explain the situation. They were fearful he would get arrested. The police officers were cool about it and admired he turned himself in before it went on any further. I don't think he gave up the information of his co-workers, and they got pee at him when the police had the bank account closed. Went to Child Protective Services over my dad and his H-addicted girlfriend. She was pregnant and due any day, still shooting up. They abandoned the farmhouse I spent some time growing up in, and I was terrified that once the baby was born, it had been neglected or abandoned in a dumpster somewhere. So I went into the offices and voiced my concerns, gave them his name, her name, her alias, and begged them to put all the hospitals in the city they fled to on high alert. It worked. When they checked in, the proper authorities were called and the baby was taken into protective services. I don't think any of my family knows I did it, but it needed to be done. You did the right thing, dude. I once called the police on my dad. He's a pisshead and was often abusive to my mum. This particular time he had all our lounge furniture piled up in the garden, trying to set it on fire, yelling at my mum the whole time as she was dousing it with water to try and stop him. The cops arrived and immediately let him know it was me that called. He threw me out the door to them and then commenced a 3-hour standoff where they closed our street and brought in the riot cops as dad was essentially holding most of our family hostage and threatening to attack the police. Pop hated me for many years after that and would barely acknowledge me. He got over it eventually and him and mum separated and it got better. Let's hear it for stupid pisshead dads. Whoop whoop. Pulled my dad off of my brother, who he was choking, broke his nose throwing him to the floor, dragged him up some stairs, front door was on the 2nd story, and kicked my addict alcoholic father out of the house on his birthday, then had to stand up to the rest of the family, including my brother, and made it clear that he was not welcome back and I would turn on any of them if they let him back in. This prompted the long overdue divorce of my parents. The legal process took 4 years and led to an estrangement of half our extended family, my dad's side, for 10 years. You did the right thing. Even threatening to kick family out of your life was good. Let them know that you love them but you weren't going to let this toxic person take any more of your life. My husband and I had to take a course through local children's aid to adopt my nephew. They are not evil monsters who are just desperate to take kids away from parents. In fact, they try to make that the last resort, sometimes to the point of making it too easy for the bio parents to clean up, in my humble opinion. What they told us was to let them decide what to do in such situations since they are trained to do it and have done the research and work as well as having connections to other services to offer assistance. You should give us an update as to what happens. I tried but failed. My mother is a C. Always wants to be the center of attention and lies to anyone who'll listen to play the victim. She was always very mentally abusive to my brother and I, who were the oldest of 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. She always told us how stupid we were and to just not flunk out of school, and her girls would be going to college and blah blah blah. Anyway, fast forward a lifetime and all the kids are out of the house, and she decides she wants to become a foster parent, and only talks about the money associated with it. I call to talk to the caseworker assigned to them but she tells me bluntly that unless they are physically abused they won't do anything, because so many children are in foster care. She ends up with different kids and different times, one a 10-year-old girl who was sexually abused. My mother does the same. You're stupid and is her typical C self, and the girl ends up running away multiple times and becomes very reckless. She was a runaway at 1.4 weeks where I was the only person she would call, generally middle of the night and from a private number. She'd just want to vent and talk. She was living with some adult, at 14, who was obviously keeping this naive woman around to be a frick toy. She eventually got caught, ended up back with the C, but is finally over 18 and on her own. I have no desire to speak to my mother again, and if she drops dead tomorrow I wouldn't give 2 fricks. I lost my best friend brother-in-law because the W he decided to marry has a 12-year-old kid that tried to abuse my 2 boys who were 3 and 5 at the time. It was a really fricked up time and I could write volumes on how awful a person his wife is, but I'll be brief and say not one single person that knows her likes her. She has slept with nearly everyone she ever met, and her reputation for her sleaze precedes her everywhere. Every single person told him he was making a huge mistake, but that only amounted to being uninvited to their destination wedding that was going to cost everyone involved, except them, about $4,000. My oldest came to us one day and told us what had been happening, so we confronted the W about this, and she went on to blame my son and say he was making the whole thing up. She layered up and got him off with no repercussions. My only consolation is they are still paying legal fees 2 years on. We have not spoken since. I never cried so much. Besides my worst fear for my kids coming true, I lost best and most trusted friend at the same time and fractured my in-laws family as well. I've somewhat gotten over it, but I still think about it all the time. I'm not as angry as I was, but that ache that someone hurt your kid right under your nose will never go away. I constantly think about what his reaction will be when he is a teenager and realizes what was happening to him, and worry about the new anger I'm going to face. But I don't regret it. I did what I had to do to protect my kids. I called CPS, Child Protective Services, on an old roommate of mine and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Smoking weed. M. Doing C. Sleeping with 17-year-olds. She was 23, and a constant stream of 17-year-old runaways living on our couch or in her bed, while the child slept on the floor. One day I saw her 3-year-old daughter go from one teenage boy to the next, fluttering eyes, making goo faces and telling each one how in love with him she was, like her mama did. Made my decision right then and there. Afterwards, I had countless people coming up to me saying they'd always thought about calling CPS but never had the guts to do it. That right there sickened me. You made the right choice and I congratulate you on having the courage to do it. You are awesome. I hear way too many stories about child protection services being called on good parents, from spiteful exes or whatnot, and not enough people having their kids taken off them because they're legitimately bad people and unfit to raise children. It's good to hear that bad people do have their kids removed from them. Amen. I'd know a thing or two about bull CPS calls. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.